Hi everyone, my name is Joanna Chibota. I will be presenting on meningitis today, specifically that caused by the bacteria Listeria monocytogenes. I chose this disease because growing up, my mother would always fret over me when I had a headache. She would always ask me where it was hurting, what are the symptoms I had, if my neck was stiff. It would be worse if I told her my headache was at the back of my head. One time she almost checked me into a hospital, and I think maybe she was affected by someone in her life was affected by this disease. Maybe somebody passed away, but I remember she wasn't very concerned about all the other diseases, but every time I had a headache, she was worried that I might have meningitis. It wasn't until about primary school in the 7th grade when I had a teacher who passed away from meningitis that I started understanding how severe this disease can be. She checked into the hospital on Friday, but by Monday she had passed away. She had contracted some form of bacterial meningitis. And so when I thought of diseases to present on, meningitis was my very first pick. I will be focusing on 3 aspects of this disease: its causes, its signs and symptoms, and its treatment. So meningitis actually has many causes. It can be viral, fungal, or bacterial. Today I'll be focusing, as I said before, on the bacterial cause, specifically Listeria monocytogenes. This bacteria is gram-positive, which means that it stains blue or purple when it's put under gram stain, and it has a thick layer of peptidoglycan in its cell wall. It is a facultative anaerobe, which means that it makes ATP by aerobic respiration if there's oxygen, but if oxygen isn't present, it switches to fermentation. It also does not produce endospores. Listeria is the 3rd most frequent cause of bacterial meningitis. It is principally spread by contaminated food. It affects immunocompromised patients and the elderly, and newborns can contract the disease in utero or shortly after birth. By immunocompromised, it refers to people, for example, who are in renal failure, who have diabetes, who abuse alcohol, maybe HIV positive, have had organ transplants, or people on corticosteroids or chemotherapy. So this infection may start out as listeriosis, but if the listeria infection spreads to your nervous system, that's how it becomes meningitis. Listeria bacteria can be found in soil, water, and animal feces. People tend to get infected by eating the following: raw vegetables that have been contaminated from the soil or from contaminated manure used as fertilizer, contaminated meat, unpasteurized milk, or foods made with unpasteurized milk. Unpasteurized milk refers to milk that has been heated quickly for a short period of time and then cooled down. This is done to kill off certain bacteria in milk. And then certain processed foods such as soft cheeses, hot dogs, deli meats, and these would have been contaminated after processing. So now we'll look at the method in which Listeria infects the body and becomes meningitis. It has surface proteins called internalins that allows it to enter epithelial cells and hepatocytes. Hepatocytes are liver cells. After phagocytosis, it becomes enclosed in a phagolysosome, which creates a rich environment for the bacteria because the low pH activates listeriolysin O, which is an exotoxin that causes rapid lysis of the phagocyte and it releases the organism into the cytoplasm. Once this bacteria is in the cytoplasm, it proliferates and becomes encased in host cell actin filaments, which allows it to form a phylopod, which you can see to the left. This is then ingested by adjacent cells, which allows the disease to be passed on without being exposed to the extracellular environment. Once the organism crosses the meninges, which if you look to the right is made up of 3 layers, the dura mater, the arachnoid matter, and the pia mater, it then grows in a person's brain, and this is how they contract meningitis. So signs and symptoms include but are not limited to headache, which is what my mother was always worried about, stiff neck, loss of balance, convulsions, confusions, or changes in alertness. Pregnant women might experience mild illness, which includes all the symptoms that I mentioned in my previous slide, but their unborn baby will probably have it much worse. They will experience the following: miscarriage, stillbirth, a potentially fatal infection after birth, or premature birth, all of these which are very unfortunate. The good news is that this disease is treatable, and the best treatment is always prevention. There are a couple of steps you can take to prevent this disease from affecting you or from affecting those around you. This first one has to do with sanitization. You must keep things clean by getting rid of all of the microorganisms that are around your food preparation areas. Wash your hands thoroughly with warm, soapy water before and after handling or preparing food. After cooking, use hot, soapy water to wash utensils, cutting boards, and other preparation surfaces. Make sure you cook your food thoroughly. Use a food thermometer to make sure your meat, poultry, and egg dishes are cooked to a safe temperature. This also includes not mixing cooked food with raw food, especially with meat, as this contaminates your food. Lastly, scrub raw vegetables. Clean raw vegetables with a scrub brush or a vegetable brush under plenty of running water. If prevention methods do not work, or if they are not followed correctly and infection still results, there are a range of antibiotics that can be used to treat this disease. It just depends on the severity of the case, and everybody has different conditions that need to be treated differently. So the most common medications used are ampicillin or penicillin. They're actually in the same family of aminopenicillin, and penicillin was discovered by Alexander Fleming in 1928 and first began being used in clinical trials in 1942. Ampicillin, whose chemical structure you can see on the right, is an irreversible inhibitor of the enzyme transpeptidase, which is needed by bacteria to make the cell wall. It inhibits the third and final stage of bacterial cell wall synthesis in binary fission, which ultimately leads to cell lysis. Therefore, ampicillin is usually bacteriolytic. Penicillin, who you can see on the left, works by bursting the cell wall of a bacteria. Drugs in the penicillin class work by indirectly bursting cell walls, as mentioned with the ampicillin, and they do this by acting directly on peptidoglycans, which play an essential role in bacterial cells. If you would like more information or to do further research on meningitis caused by listeria, you can follow these links. These are the links I use to do my research. Oxford Clinical Infectious Diseases, Science Direct, and Mayo Clinic. These articles contain more information on the causes and symptoms and treatment that can be followed when somebody contracts this type of meningitis.